So of course we are in Mental Health Awareness Month, and we have a series of speakers that I'm really excited about. And Kate, I'm really excited that you're our first speaker this month. So I met Kate through MindOut, but Kate's been working in the mental health field, I believe, for a long time.
Yeah.
You're a senior manager, a frontline worker, a trainer, a fundraiser.
Now I'm doing all the fundraising.
And a whole lot more, yeah. So I know that you began your journey with MindOut when you started facilitating an open group back in 2008.
Well done.
And then one thing led to another, and you got more involved, and then suddenly you were chair of the board.
Yes.
And then, of course, now you're the business development manager, so really it is all, so you have to find all the money for services.
Yes.
Wow. Now, in case you didn't know, MindOut is run by and for LGBT people. They provide advocacy, including specialist trans advocacy, advice and information, case work support, peer support groups, peer mentoring, suicide prevention, mental health promotion, anti-stigma events, mental health and LGBTQ related workshops and courses, and, I knew there was 10, an out of hours online support service. The services, of course, are confidential, independent, impartial, and importantly free.
Yes.
So you really do have your work cut out for you. Kate, it's an absolute honour to welcome you as our first speaker in Mental Health Awareness Month. Welcome, Kate Webb.
Well, I'm quite nervous. It's really great to be here. I have got some notes, so I'm not a charismatic speaker like Michael or anything. I shouldn't say that sort of thing, should I? Okay, so I'm just going to read a quick quote, which is a definition of what good mental health is by the World Health Organization. And it's not poetry, but it's still good. A state of well-being in which every individual realises his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So that is a sort of a generic World Health Organization definition of mental health. And I think the thing for me is the bit about community. So today I'm going to talk a bit about how I'm trying to sort of weave in LGBT mental health with a sense of sort of religion or spirituality or faith, however that is, but whatever that means to each individual. And how I think mental health and faith kind of go hand in hand together, even if you're not a believer in a traditional God. We all have inherent spirituality. And I'm going to talk a bit about how recovery from a mental health crisis is a bit akin to discovery or rediscovery of faith and spirituality. Before I sort of talk about that, I just thought you may already know some of this, but I thought it might be useful to have tell you a few statistics about LGBT mental health. The LGBTQ population are twice as likely as heterosexual population to have suicidal thoughts or make attempts on their life. And they're 2 to 3 times more likely to experience depression and anxiety. 84% of trans people have had suicidal thoughts. I mean, that's a really shocking statistic. Happily, that drops quite significantly once people have received treatment or surgery or whatever, or recognition of their sort of non-binary or trans status. But 41% of trans people have actually made a suicide attempt. So it's a very serious issue. We also know that LGBTQ people have about 50% more difficulties accessing mental health services and getting the help that they need. And this is really mainly to do with the fact that services often sort of lack capacity to really find out and deal with the needs of LGBTQ people. They're not talking to us, they're not sort of finding out what we need, and they're not providing it. So I think that those stats sort of make you stop and think a bit, and there's a bit of a stark reality about inequality. And sometimes I think these inequalities are not necessarily the result of out-and-out homophobia, transphobia or biphobia, but they're a bit more about sort of ignorance and invisibility, that there's still that sense of ignorance, or services too stretched, too busy, and that, I think, leaves us vulnerable, leaves our communities vulnerable. We're still not seen, we're still not understood, and some people have real difficulty getting the help that they need. A lot of us, many of our service users that come to MindOut have had religious upbringings. They talk about their spirituality and their faith, and talk about those associations as being sort of positive. So faith can have a real, it's well known that faith can have a positive, really positive for people around their well-being. And apparently well-being is highest amongst religious people in terms of when they've done reports and that sort of thing. But I mean, everybody here knows for LGBTQ people that's a lot more complicated. Many people have experienced sort of rejection or being sort of cast out, from their communities around their sexual orientation or gender identity. And often the experience of coming out means that people kind of get forced to choose between their, gender or sexual orientation and their religious beliefs. And I also wonder, and people report to us, that they often feel not represented, sort of thing, within traditional religious situations and groups. So the depictions are often about sort of straight families, cisgender communities, and so I think LGBTQ people often they might not feel actively excluded or pushed out, but they don't feel that sense of recognition or welcome or affirmation about their difference. So we can talk about families where there's sort of heteronormative situation, but there's not the inclusion of different families, different ways of loving, different identities. And so there's no sort of recognisable spiritual role models often for us to aspire to. So I think LGBTQ people can often feel unrecognised, invisible, and it's difficult for us to be our authentic selves. I think that's kind of a common experience anyway in society, but it can also be at the root of, mental health, it's at the root of mental health problems. It's the root of feeling estranged from religious beliefs and faith. And this leads to a real internalised homophobia. It can lead to a lot of internalised homophobia, there's a big association between internalised homophobia and increased suicidal feelings and depression and anxiety. So when we can't be ourselves, we're going to be more depressed, more anxious, more suicidal, and more isolated. But as you all know, because you're all attending this lovely church, that the affirming religious beliefs can help to strengthen well-being. So we have to be very, very explicit, and I'll talk a bit more about, affirmative practice, because it's happening here anyway. But I just thought it would be useful to think for a little bit about the parallels between losing faith or being kind of cast out of a religious sort of upbringing, and also the experience of having mental health issues and coming to a crisis. And I sort of, when I was thinking about coming to do this talk, I thought they were quite parallel, you could see them as parallel processes actually. That often if you lose your faith or coming out means you can't then be part of the church that you were brought up in. There's a sense of sort of groundlessness or lack of meaning, where everything, you're sort of questioning everything you know, and it's hard to sort of find answers to those big questions about, what am I here for? How can I be meaningful? Those experiences of loss, there's nowhere to process those or to sort of you know, deal with them. So it can make you feel very wobbly, very sort of ungrounded. And there's, of course, that rejection of your community as well. And people with mental health problems, you know, often people with a crisis, people with serious depression, they have those questions. They feel that sense of heavy meaninglessness and groundlessness. And often people with mental health problems are very, very isolated. You know, we're dealing with unbelievable isolation and loneliness quite often with the service users that are coming to see us. So again, if you feel rejected, you're coming out and you're not able to take part in the religious community you've been used to, there's that sense of loss of support, loss of identity, and sort of that sense of affiliation. I think people with mental health problems feel like that generally in society, that loss of affiliation and belonging. Often, you know, when we come out, there can be that disconnect from family, made even stronger if there's, you know, a strong religious background. And families provide emotional support and that sort of sense of identity and continuity. And again, people with mental health problems often are isolated and disconnected from their families. So being LGBT and sort of moving away from religious beliefs or upbringing can, you know, bring lots of strain on those family relationships. So in terms of recovery, there's I don't know if anyone knows about that the concept of recovery within mental health. Anyone heard of that? So it's not a kind of endpoint. It's a process by which people that are living with, you know, quite serious mental health come to a sense of hope and understanding and integration of some of those extremely painful experiences and a life that's beyond just that sort of identity of having a mental health issue. And in a way, I would like to sort of compare that with discovering or rediscovering faith and spirituality. So when we sort of, sorry, I'm just going to go back to explaining a bit more about recovery. So it's not like some sort of linear process, and often many people don't ever recover from mental health problems. We live with them and we learn to live better with them and feel more integrated and positive, and still be able to achieve the things that it's our birthright, you know, to achieve, and, you know, relationships, meaningful occupation, whether that be work, volunteering, whatever that is. And a lot of what people say that they recover in that process is their spiritual awareness, spiritual faith, that however the divine touches them. So often when people start, you know, facing those tough questions and facing up to the fact that they've had really difficult experiences and they've got ongoing mental health problems, they have to sort of face those tough questions, and that can be a real potential for growth for people if they can get the support that they need and integrate some of that pain rather than sort of pushing it out or not be able to cope with it. Sort of increases their strength, their resilience, their well-being. And it can really help people to sort of re-examine and redefine what is important to them, who they are, what they're put on this earth to do, and what's meaningful for them. That renewed sense of faith, I suppose, in themselves, what's important to me as a person, and what kind of person do I want to be. These are all classical sort of spiritual, religious questions as well. And it's all about a sort of that process of reflection. Often people, when they start that process of recovery, they need a lot of support, but they discover a new community. And I think often LGBT people that have kind of lost their religious faith or been cast out, they search for, you know, like-minded people, so people who are going to allow them to express who they authentically are, their true identities, along with their spiritual beliefs. And again, that's exactly the same with people with mental health problems. It's about that integration, that authentic self, the pain and the strengths, all, you know, sitting kind of together. And sort of one helps the other. And that sort of reconnection, you know, with community and with important people, and that might not necessarily be your family of origin, because that might be too difficult, that still might be impossible. But we choose our family, like family here. I'm sure everyone, I mean, I certainly have chosen my own family, although my relationships with my own family are a lot better now. You know, we make, you know, once we feel strong enough to reach out and see we feel strong in ourselves, then we can get that sense of family in other places. That's really important. So, how long have I been going on for? Am I all right to keep going for a bit?
Yeah.
So, just think for a minute about what affirmative spiritual practices, or what affirmative religious and sustainable spirituality is all about. And it's exactly the same sort of stuff as with mental health recovery. So that process of, if you've come away from your religious beliefs and you're coming back, of allowing yourself to sort of grieve about the loss of that. Often people that have lived with mental health problems there might be a lot of loss and pain around childhood issues, difficulties. So being able to express your true feelings can allow a bit of healing. And that sort of sense of shifting the focus from out there to inward, so reflecting, thinking about what you want to do, what your needs are, not being pulled by what other people want, how to look after yourself, like we're truly learning how to sort of look after ourselves. Not just believing in the stuff that we've been, you know, received wisdom, but finding that wise place in ourselves. I think it's just doubly hard often for LGBT people because they're dealing with so much discrimination, stigma and other difficulties. It's hard to be our sort of true selves. And learning about the ways in which we are able to express that sort of sense of the divine in ourselves and in others and the world around us. So whatever you connect with, whatever feels right to you as an individual, and that's really important when people are coming from mental health issues. And often people have come from a place of loneliness, isolation, not doing anything, feeling completely useless, like they're not contributing to the world. So that sense of sort of rediscovering purpose, so rediscovering faith, rediscovering our usefulness is part, you know, goes hand in hand, I think. And then hopefully through that process of recovery, people can then rejoin the community and come out of that isolation and really trust that we've all got things to give and take. So that's really what I was going to say. So if anyone's got any questions or would like to add anything.
I have actually. So you were talking about the parallel between mental health and mental health recovery, and spirituality. And one of the things I found interesting was that you encourage someone to find their own path and to let go of those things that perhaps were damaging them, and perhaps, you know, focus more on those things that build them up and secure them. Both in terms of mental health, where somebody has grown up with a paradigm which is damaging them, and in spirituality, where somebody again has a religious paradigm which they perhaps walked away from, but it's damaging them. And when they walk back to that, how do you then manage that integration so that they don't end up in a situation that's damaging them again? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when somebody starts to reconnect with their family, then they start to reconnect with the paradigms in their family which were causing all the damage in the first place.
That's right.
And so it's finding a way of how do you encourage that, or how do you manage that relationship so that it doesn't draw somebody back into where they were.
And I mean quite often there's like, for instance, what we do at MindOut is we've really tried hard to create that sense of family. We try not to use the word family too much because I know that's difficult for a lot of people, but that sense of support. So the peer support, people are there for each other. They use that space, all the groups, to talk about those difficulties, find the commonalities, and the commonalities strengthen them. And then people talk with each other about what bits do I want, what bits do I not want. And it's about gaining that sense of, you know, that inner compass and anchor in yourself, and the self-management skills. So I think it's really difficult for people if they're flooded with difficult thoughts, difficult feelings, to be able to make good choices around how they connect back with things that have damaged them. You know, they don't want to be completely cut off, but you've got to feel strong enough to have that sense of self-protection, know what your triggers are, know when enough is enough, know how to sort of bring feelings, thoughts, emotions down. So there's, you know, that I'm sure you talk about this within this group, don't you, about those techniques, sort of cognitive behavioural techniques, whatever works for you. It's really important to help that person find the thing that helps them self-manage before they, and not encourage them to connect with something that is going to be too much. So what things resonate, you know, it's just very much of that sort of person-centred approach of what's going to help you. And if someone doesn't know, then often saying things like, well, just think about a time when you did feel a bit stronger. What was going on for you then? What made you happy? What worked for you? Because sometimes people, they just can't find anything. So you can just encourage them, or say something like, if you felt 25% better than you do right now, what would that look like? So you're almost modelling another possibility for people, even if they can't quite hold on to it for themselves. It's about, that's our job really, to hold the hope for each other, isn't it? And when people are really unwell, they really, you know, they need that. And often talking through, what would you do when you go, you know, how's it going to be when you go to your family or you go back to connect with that religious community? How are you going to behave? How are you going to protect yourself? So have a plan A, B, C in place that gives the structure for people to experiment a bit and try and just keep it as safe as possible, I guess.
Thank you.
So build people up and support them until they're ready to make the better choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kate, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.